They say your 20s are for figuring yourself out, but I figured out exactly who I was by the time I turned 27, and it was the people around me who didn't like what they saw. My name's Brian, I'm 27, and up until a few months ago, I used to think loyalty to your family was everything. Like if you just worked hard, stayed humble, and took care of your own, things would eventually balance out. Turns out, sometimes the people you bend over backwards for will never see you as anything more than a convenient footstool. Growing up, I was the middle child, sandwiched between two loud, demanding siblings. Emily, my older sister, and Jake, the golden boy of the family. Our parents weren't exactly subtle about playing favorites. Emily could do no wrong. She was loud, brash, and had a gift for turning every family gathering into her personal TED Talk. She once interrupted my birthday cake cutting to announce her new position at a startup no one had heard of, and our parents acted like she'd won a Nobel Prize. Jake, on the other hand, was the baby, 4 years younger than me, and the kind of kid who once cried because he didn't get the same birthday present 2 years in a row. Mom and Dad practically built a shrine around him. If he so much as passed a college class, we were all summoned for a family dinner. If I got a raise or helped cover the electric bill when Jake forgot again, nothing, not even a thanks. I never really fought it. I kept my head down, worked 2 jobs through college, and stayed out of trouble. When Jake totaled his first car, I co-signed the lease for the BMW he drives now. When Emily needed help with her credit card debt, I quietly paid off a chunk just so it wouldn't tank her score. Not once did I ask for anything in return. I thought that was just what you did. You help the people you love, and they look out for you when it's your turn. But my turn never came. Things started shifting when I got promoted at work earlier this year. I'd been grinding for that role for months. Long hours, impossible deadlines, constant pressure. When I finally got it, it felt like more than a win. It felt like proof. Proof that all the sacrifices, the weekends I skipped out on hanging with friends, the birthdays I missed, the bills I covered for Jake without so much as a word, it all meant something. I was finally getting somewhere. So I did what anyone would do. I texted my family. Big news. Got the promotion. Let's do dinner this weekend, my treat. The replies came quickly. Emily, congrats. I'll check my calendar. Jake, nice bro. Mom, we'll see if we can fit it in. You know your sister's been house hunting. House hunting? That was news to me. Last I heard, Emily was living in a luxury downtown apartment that she somehow managed to negotiate down to a rate that still cost more than my mortgage. But whatever, I figured they'd still make time. I booked a table at my favorite Italian place, a cozy little spot I loved since college, and reserved a corner booth for 6. Saturday night, 7 p.m. I even called ahead and asked if they could bring out a small congratulatory cake after dinner. I showed up early, wearing a button-down and the watch I bought myself after my first big paycheck. I even ordered a bottle of wine to start things off, something nice, but not flashy. 7 o'clock came and went. I kept checking my phone. No missed calls. No new texts. By 7:20, I started feeling like a sitcom character left at the altar. I texted the group. Hey, you guys close? No reply. The waiter came by for the 3rd time, looking increasingly sympathetic. I told him to give it 15 more minutes. At 7:45, I ordered my meal. Alone, I sat there, twirling my fork, chewing slowly, hoping maybe, just maybe, they'd show up halfway through and laugh it off like some ridiculous mix-up. But they didn't. I finished my meal in silence. When the waiter brought the cake, "Congrats, Brian," written in red frosting, I almost laughed. It felt like a joke. And then my phone buzzed. It was a picture from Emily on Instagram. A smiling selfie. Champagne glasses clinking. Jake in the background, grinning like he just won the lottery. The caption read, "Cheers to the new homeowner. Couldn't be prouder of my baby bro." I just stared at it. Not only had they skipped my dinner, they had thrown a whole celebration for Jake. Bought him a condo, apparently. Probably helped him furnish it, too. I had just covered his car insurance, again, last week. $750 a month for a BMW I'd never even ridden in. He was still figuring things out, Mom always said. He'll pay you back when he gets on his feet. I paid the bill for my lonely dinner, left a good tip because it wasn't the waiter's fault, and walked to the parking lot feeling like I'd just been gut-punched. The street was quiet. The BMW was parked right next to my dusty sedan. I looked at it for a long time, keys in hand. That's when it hit me. I didn't owe them anything. Not my time, not my money, not my silence. and definitely not my patience. I walked over to Jake's car, pulled out a pen from my jacket, and grabbed the back of an old receipt from my wallet. I scribbled down 4 words. Figure it out. B. Then I opened my phone, scrolled to the insurance app, and hit cancel. Coverage ends at midnight. By sunrise, I had 56 missed calls. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch. Yes, the couch, because I couldn't even bring myself to climb into bed, just staring at the ceiling with the pale blue light of my phone reflecting off the walls. The missed calls had come in waves. First from Jake, then Mom, then Jake again, then Emily, and finally Dad. His was the only one I opened. Dad, you've got a lot of nerve. Call me. Now. I didn't. I didn't respond, didn't text, didn't answer. I just turned the phone face down and listened to the silence in my apartment. That's when the numbness started to give way to something else. Not sadness, not even anger, just realization. Like a glass wall had shattered, and I was finally seeing the shape of things behind it. I had been orbiting a sun that never gave me any warmth, only pulled me back whenever I tried to drift too far. The next morning, I made coffee like I always did. Poured it into the same chipped mug I'd had since college, the one Jake always made fun of. Dude, you make 6 figures and drink out of a cup from a gas station? He said that last Thanksgiving, while I was the one who picked him up from the airport at midnight and let him crash on my couch for a week because he didn't feel like Ubering. It wasn't until that morning, standing barefoot in my kitchen, that I realized something else. No one had ever picked me up from anything. Not emotionally, not financially, not even literally. Around 9 a.m., my phone started buzzing again. Jake. Then a text. Jake, are you serious right now? You left me stranded. Jake. Car wouldn't start. Had to Uber to work. That's $38. You gonna Venmo that, or what? I actually laughed. Out loud. Not the kind of laugh you want to share, either. The bitter, sharp kind that makes your eyes sting a little. Me? Figure it out. That was it. I sent the same 4 words I'd scribbled onto the receipt, then muted the conversation. I didn't block him. I wanted him to see I read every word. I wanted him to stew in the silence. Over the next week, the family tried every tactic in the book. Guilt, gaslighting, backhanded concern. Mom texted a picture of Jake standing next to his disabled BMW, arms crossed like a pouty action figure. Mom, is this really how you want to treat your brother? Me. I treated him just fine. For the last 4 years. Dad called again that night. This time, I answered. Brian, he said flatly. We need to talk. Do we? I replied, sipping from the same chipped mug. There was a pause. You embarrassed your brother. Oh no, I said, mock gasping. Was the poor baby not prepared to pay for his own ride? This isn't how family handles things, he said, like he was reciting from a manual. Yeah, I know. Family skips your promotion dinner to pop champagne for your brother's new condo. Speaking of, when were you going to tell me about that? Dad sighed. That heavy, performative kind of sigh that's meant to put you on the defensive. We knew you'd make it about yourself. Make what about myself? I asked. The fact that I paid for my own celebration while you were literally buying him real estate? I don't think you can make that up. You didn't ask us for anything, Brian. Jake needed help. You never. I didn't ask. I cut in, because I was busy being the one who helped. You guys just expected it. You never even noticed when I was struggling. He went quiet after that. I waited, sipping slowly. He finally spoke. Your mother's upset. I'm sure she is. She's worried you're isolating yourself. I smiled to myself. Tell her not to worry. I feel clearer than I've ever felt. I ended the call before he could respond. That was the beginning of the real fracture. For the next few days, it was like living on a fault line. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. Not because I didn't expect the messages, but because part of me still hoped they'd be different. Maybe this time, one of them would say, we're sorry. We messed up. You deserved better. But they never did. Instead, I got pearls like, Emily, you know Mom and Dad are stressed enough. Why are you adding to it? Jake, hope you're happy. Now they're talking about taking the car back. You ruined everything. Mom, maybe you should apologize and we can all move on. That one stuck with me the most. I should apologize. A week after the dinner incident, I finally caved and showed up at the house. Not to make amends, just to see if I was insane. If maybe, by seeing them in person, the fog would clear and things would start making sense again. Jake was lounging on the couch when I walked in, shirtless, Xbox controller in hand, crumbs on his chest. Look who decided to show up, he muttered. I ignored him and went straight to the kitchen. Mom was there, chopping something aggressively. I figured you'd come, she said without looking up. I'm not here to fight, I said. Just trying to understand. She put the knife down and looked at me. Really looked. But there was no warmth in her eyes. Only tiredness. Or maybe it was disdain. You embarrassed your brother in front of his friends. He couldn't even drive to his open house appointment the next morning. He's 23, Mom. I was working 2 jobs and taking night classes at that age. He's going through a lot. So was I. When I had to sleep in my car for 2 weeks after college because I didn't want to ask you for help and be told I was a burden. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition. But just like that, it was gone. You always made things harder on yourself, she said. You chose that. That was it. The sentence that broke the dam. I turned to leave, but Dad was standing in the hallway. You're not a victim, Brian. I stared at him, blinking slowly. I know I'm not. Victims don't have a choice. I do. And I'm done playing my part in your little family script. He crossed his arms. Don't be dramatic. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. You haven't even asked what the promotion was. Silence. Figures, I muttered, brushing past them and heading toward the door. But just before I reached it, Emily came out of the bathroom, her phone in hand, and said with a smirk, Hope you don't mind. I told some of our cousins you've been having a rough time mentally. Just so they don't think you're, unstable for lashing out like this. I stopped in my tracks. You what? She shrugged, all innocence. We didn't want people worrying. Or thinking you were going off the rails. I'm not unstable, I said, my voice lower now. I'm finally stable enough to stop letting you people walk all over me. She rolled her eyes. God, Brian. It's not that deep. That was when I knew. There was no salvaging this. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I walked out, got in my car, and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, just breathing. My phone buzzed again. Jake. Did you tell them you're not paying the insurance anymore? Dad says we need to talk. Jake. Also, do you still have the spare key? I think I lost mine. I turned off my phone. That was the last time I stepped foot in that house. Or so I thought. Because 3 days later, something happened that forced my hand. Something that took the quiet fracture and shattered it into something beyond repair. I came home from work one night, just after 8. My apartment was dark. I flicked on the lights, tossed my bag on the couch, and stopped cold. My door was unlocked. Not wide open, just slightly ajar. Inside, everything looked fine at first glance. No broken windows. No drawers yanked open. No signs of a struggle. Until I stepped into the kitchen and saw the post-it note. It was stuck to the fridge. Pale yellow. Familiar handwriting. Call us. Now. Dad. I opened the fridge. All the food I'd prepped for the week was gone. My beers were gone. Even the leftover cake from my promotion dinner, the one I hadn't been able to bring myself to finish, was gone. And sitting in its place was a half-empty 6-pack of the cheap beer Jake always drank, sweating in the light. I stepped back, my mouth dry, my heart pounding. I walked through the apartment slowly, flipping on every light. The bathroom mirror had water spots. The towel was damp. My Xbox controller was out of place. Someone had been here, and I knew exactly who. But I didn't call them. Not yet, because I had one last card left to play, and they had no idea how badly they'd just overplayed theirs. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat in the kitchen with the fridge open, the cheap beers staring back at me like some twisted calling card. I couldn't prove it, not legally, anyway, but I knew in my bones that Jake had been in my apartment. No one else had a key. Not my friends, not my coworkers. Just me and him. The sheer audacity of it paralyzed me. After everything, after skipping my celebration, mocking me, leeching off me for years, he'd used the key I gave him in good faith to waltz into my home, drink my beer, eat my food, and leave me a note like I was the one who owed them an explanation. I didn't call the cops. I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that fight. Instead, I poured every bottle of that cheap beer down the sink, watching it foam and swirl like dirty dishwater. Then I sat down, opened my phone, and finally, started changing things. The first thing I did was deactivate Jake's spare key from my smart lock. The second, I ordered a new deadbolt, one that required a physical key. Then I logged into every shared service and scrubbed them off. Spotify Family Plan, Netflix, Hulu. Even the Amazon Prime account Mom had guilt me into paying for because we all use it. Not anymore. I changed passwords, removed devices, unlinked payment methods. It was like performing surgery, cutting out tumors that had grown so gradually I hadn't noticed how deeply they were embedded. But the hardest thing to do, the thing that made my hands shake, was open the group chat. I stared at the screen for a full 10 minutes before typing. I know one of you used the spare key to get into my place. That was a line you never should have crossed. I've changed the locks. I've removed you from everything. And I don't want to hear from any of you until you're ready to take accountability. Full stop. Then I hit send and left the chat. I thought I'd feel lighter, free, but instead, a heaviness settled into my chest, one I didn't know how to shake. Because despite everything, they were still my family, my parents, my siblings. And there's something deeply unnatural about closing the door on people who share your blood, even when they've shown you nothing but contempt. The next few weeks were quiet, unsettlingly quiet. At first, it was like they didn't believe me. I got a few missed calls, but no voicemails, no texts, no unannounced drop-ins. They were probably waiting me out, assuming I'd fold like I always did. But I didn't. I leaned into the silence. I made it my sanctuary. I started working out again. Just light stuff. Morning jogs, bodyweight exercises, nothing fancy, but it gave me structure. Purpose. I cleaned my apartment, rearranged the furniture, donated clothes I didn't wear. I made space, literally and figuratively. And for the first time in years, I started going out on weekends without dreading the call from Jake or Mom asking for just one small thing. I got drinks with coworkers, reconnected with an old college buddy over brunch. I even signed up for a pottery class. Me, Brian, the guy who once got laughed at for wanting to take a ceramics elective in high school because Jake said, "What are you going to do? Make us matching mugs." Yeah, I made a mug. It wasn't perfect, little lopsided on the rim, but it held coffee, and it was mine. Work, too, started to feel different. Not just because of the promotion, but because I wasn't distracted anymore. I wasn't splitting my energy between managing my responsibilities and cleaning up my family's messes. My boss noticed. I started getting looped into bigger meetings, offered more leadership opportunities. There was even quiet talk about a relocation package to head the regional office in Denver. But as things in my life began to blossom, I couldn't shake the looming shadow of them. Because narcissists don't let go easily. And sure enough, the storm came. Just not in the way I expected. It started with Emily. She emailed me 3 weeks after I cut everyone off. "Hey, look, I know things got out of hand, but you're being really unfair. None of us broke into your place. Jake said he was invited. I get that you're feeling hurt, but ghosting your entire family over one dinner is insane. We're your blood, Brian. You don't just walk away from blood." She ended the email with, "If you're still mad, fine. But don't let that ruin Thanksgiving. We're hosting it this year. You should come." I read it twice. Then I archived it without replying. Thanksgiving came and went. I made steak and roasted vegetables, lit candles, and watched The Martian with my feet up on the coffee table. It was the best holiday I'd had in years. But after Thanksgiving, the gloves came off. Mom called me at work. I let it go to voicemail. "I'm done playing games, Brian. You owe your brother an apology. He's had a hard enough time as it is. And now he has to go back to taking the bus like some teenager." That voicemail was followed by another one from Jake. "You think you're better than me? Just because you got some stupid desk job? You know why they promoted you? Because you're boring and you never question anything." He was slurring his words. Probably drunk. But the venom in his voice made my stomach turn. Then came the message from Dad. "We're very disappointed in you. You've made your mother cry multiple times. I don't know who you think you are, but if you keep acting like this, you can forget about being part of this family." That one I saved. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I just sat on my couch, listening to it on loop, nodding to myself. It was a gift in a way. Clarity. Proof that love in our family had always been conditional. But the real shock came in mid-December, right as I was finalizing a massive project at work. I got an email from my apartment complex. The subject line made my heart sink. Notice of guest violation and complaint. I opened it, eyes scanning rapidly. Apparently, someone claiming to be my brother had tried to get into the building by telling the front desk he'd left something in my unit. When they refused to let him up, he caused a scene. Yelling, swearing, banging on the glass. Security was called. I was lucky he didn't get arrested. I called the office immediately, explained the situation, and gave them an official no-entry order for Jake and my entire family. I even had them remove all emergency contacts and replace them with a friend from work. That night, I sat on the balcony with a blanket wrapped around me, staring at the city lights. And for the first time, I felt alone. Not in a sad, pitiful way. Just alone. Like standing on a mountaintop after a storm. The wreckage was behind me. The air was thin, but I could finally breathe. The new year came quietly. No Happy New Year texts. No invites. Just the hum of my space heater and the soft clink of a glass of whiskey against ceramic as I raised my wonky, handmade mug in a silent toast to myself. And then, something unexpected happened. One morning, while walking to the cafe near my apartment, I ran into an old teacher, Mrs. Dempsey. She'd taught me art history back in high school, and I remembered liking her class even though I never said much. She looked older, but still sharp-eyed and warm. "Brian," she said, tilting her head. "Is that you?" We chatted for a bit. I told her about my job, the promotion, the pottery class. She smiled, genuinely. "You always had depth," she said. I could tell, even back then. I don't know why, but that hit me harder than anything else that year. Not because it was some grand validation, but because she saw me. Not the role I played in the family. Not the money I made or the support I gave. Just me. It stuck with me. That night, I pulled out an old sketchbook I hadn't touched in years. I started drawing. Badly, at first. My lines were rusty, my shading uneven. But something inside me sparked. Not a flame, just a flicker. And I nurtured it. I started going to open studio nights at the local community center. I met other people. People who weren't interested in what I could do for them, but in what I was creating. It was humbling, liberating, healing. By spring, I was hosting weekend art nights at my place. Nothing fancy, just a few friends, music, snacks, a big table full of clay and charcoal, and old watercolors. I even started selling small pieces online. Not for profit, just for joy. And every time I shipped something out, I smiled to myself, thinking, this never would have happened if they'd just come to dinner. But just as I began to rebuild myself, they found a new way to knock me down. Because blood might be thicker than water, but it also stains deeper. And one morning in April, I opened a letter that made my hands tremble. It was a formal notice from a family attorney. Apparently, my parents had drafted a new estate plan, and I was no longer in it. Not even for a sentimental item. Not even for a photo album. Just erased. The envelope wasn't even sealed properly. It had a soft crinkle in one corner, as if someone had half-heartedly folded it into a coat pocket and forgotten about it for a few days before remembering. Oh right, let's make sure Brian knows he's officially been erased. I read the letter 3 times, each slower than the last. It wasn't dramatic, just cold. This notice is to inform you of changes to the estate plan of Mr. and Mrs. John and Elaine Weller, as executed on March 14th. Per their request, you have been removed as a named beneficiary. This decision is final. No further communication is necessary. No, we regret to inform you. No reason. Not even a line about how this was a difficult decision. Just the deletion. Like I was a typo in a family document. I sat on the couch holding that letter, trying to convince myself I shouldn't care. That I hadn't expected anything. That I hadn't already assumed they would favor Jake in the will, just like they had in everything else. But this wasn't about money. It wasn't about real estate or trust funds or heirlooms. It was about closure. And they had just slammed the door in my face. No knock. No warning. At that moment, something inside me snapped. Not in the loud, destructive way you see in movies, but in the quiet, focused way a lens clicks into place. I had spent years giving my family the benefit of the doubt, excusing their behavior, minimizing the damage, telling myself that this is just how some families are. But this was war. And for the first time, I wasn't going to fight fair. I wasn't going to play the role of the bigger person or the quiet fixer. I wasn't going to cry in my apartment while they toasted each other over my exclusion. No, I was going to make them see me, feel me, remember me, and then wish they hadn't. The first thing I did was call Marcus. He's not a lawyer. He's a financial advisor I met during a work conference 2 years ago. We'd stayed loosely in touch, mostly LinkedIn comments and occasional fantasy football trash talk. But he was sharp, discreet, and, most importantly, well-connected. I forwarded him a scanned copy of the letter and explained the background. His reply came within an hour. This is petty. but not illegal. You want to hit back? Then we don't go through them. We go around them. Tell me, do you know what Jake does for money these days? I paused. That was a good question. Jake had flunked out of college twice. He bounced between half-baked startup schemes, Uber driving, and freelance consulting, which I'd always assumed was just code for mooching off whoever he was dating at the time. And yet, somehow, he always had new clothes, new electronics, and enough gas to cruise around in a BMW he didn't pay insurance on. Marcus and I started digging. We combed through LinkedIn, empty, social media, brag-heavy but vague, and even those sketchy business registry sites where people register fake LLCs to look important. Nothing stuck. But then we found it. A barely active site for Weller Creative Solutions LLC, featuring a single page with typos, a generic stock photo header, and a contact form that led nowhere. The address? My parents' house. Marcus laughed when he saw it. Classic. He probably uses this to apply for freelance gigs while claiming the car as a business write-off. You know this could be tax fraud, right? I raised an eyebrow. I mean, he continued, if he's deducting insurance or mileage under a fake LLC, and your parents are co-signing or sheltering it under their address, that's a lot of misfiled paperwork. My stomach turned a little. Could this actually get them in trouble? Absolutely, Marcus said. But more importantly, it gives you leverage. See, revenge isn't about vengeance. Not really. It's about leverage. It's about timing. It's about building something so undeniably true that even your enemies are forced to respect it. So I got to work. First, I created a folder. Weller Project /01_ legal leveraging. Inside, I started collecting everything. Bank statements, payment receipts for Jake's insurance, screenshots of group texts where I was asked to cover bills, emails, voicemails. I even had the photo of him standing in front of his new condo with my parents, courtesy of Emily's Instagram post. That condo, I learned, had been purchased under a family trust set up 6 months earlier. A trust one was never told about. A trust my parents must have formed right around the time Jake borrowed money from me twice to cover his emergency medical bills. Guess who the trust beneficiary was? Not Emily. Just Jake. Meanwhile, my old texts begging for help with student loans or a rent shortfall went ignored. My next move was quiet. I reached out to a woman named Danielle, a friend from my pottery class whose brother worked for a small but respected local newspaper. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to pique interest. Let's say, I asked casually over coffee, someone discovers a story about a family using fake business expenses to fund one sibling's lavish lifestyle, while the other sibling pays for everything and gets cut out of the estate. Would that be interesting to your brother? She blinked, then grinned. Extremely. We weren't aiming for front-page drama, just enough pressure, enough visibility. Because if there's one thing my parents hated more than being challenged, it was being embarrassed. They were all about appearances. Family Christmas cards with forced smiles. Facebook posts about how proud we are of our kids. Church brunches where my mom would chirp about Emily's career and Jake's potential, and then say, "Oh, Brian, he's just quiet." They crafted an image. I was going to tarnish it, but I didn't want to tip my hand too early. So I kept smiling at work, kept going to pottery. I even sent Jake a Venmo request for the beer he left in my fridge. He declined it. Of course, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused, laser-focused. Then one afternoon, while digging through my archived emails, I found something I'd forgotten about, an old insurance form. When Jake first got the BMW, I had filled out the paperwork under my name. He hadn't bothered. I even had a photo of the handwritten note he left saying, "Bro THX for doing all this boring stuff." And on that form, under driver relationship to policyholder, I had written, "Not related." At the time, it was a joke, a petty little stab at how distant I already felt from him. But now, it was gold. Because if Jake ever claimed the car was part of his business, he couldn't legally backdate that relationship. And if the trust had covered his down payment, but the documents listed me as the insurance holder, they were already out of bounds. Things were aligning. The puzzle pieces were starting to click. And then came the final spark. A coworker forwarded me an invite to a charity auction gala, hosted by none other than the same real estate firm that had helped my parents secure Jake's condo. They'd apparently donated it as part of a young leaders housing initiative. Guess who was being honored as a guest speaker? Jake Weller. He even had a bio on the event site. Founder of Weller Creative Solutions, supporting small businesses with dynamic strategy and design. I nearly choked on my coffee. I called Marcus immediately. "You're not going to believe this," I said. But he just chuckled. "Perfect. This is the spotlight. The one thing your parents want more than control." "What do I do?" I asked. "You go," he said. "You go and you watch. Let them see you. Let them wonder. And when they least expect it, you pull the string." I stared at the screen, at Jake's smug face next to a fake mission statement, and smiled. Because the thing about puppets is, they never know when the show's about to end. The night of the gala felt like walking into a perfectly staged play. Chandeliers glittering, champagne bubbling, everyone pretending to care about charity while sizing each other up. I wore a simple black suit, freshly pressed, nothing flashy. I didn't need to look rich. I just needed to look like I belonged. The venue was a luxury hotel ballroom downtown, filled with real estate brokers, investors, and the type of people who introduced themselves by their job titles. I scanned the room until I saw them. My parents, standing near the open bar, smiling too wide, glowing with pride. And there he was in the middle of it all, Jake. He was dressed like he was born for this. Custom navy suit, slicked back hair, glass of champagne in hand. He looked like the golden boy he'd always been, laughing, posing for pictures. The name tag on his chest read, Jake Weller, founder, Weller Creative Solutions. The words nearly made me laugh out loud. I stayed out of sight, hovering near the back, nodding politely at strangers who didn't care who I was. The event was scheduled to feature Jake as a success story, the up-and-coming entrepreneur who had benefited from the firm's mentorship program and gone on to build a thriving business. Except there was no business. Not really. Because over the past few weeks, I'd quietly worked with Marcus and Danielle's brother, the journalist, to verify everything. The LLC was inactive. The supposed clients listed on Jake's portfolio didn't exist. And the business loan he bragged about? It was just a disguised family transfer from my parents' trust. We had records, screenshots, emails, enough to turn his entire public image inside out. The article had already been written. We agreed to publish it at 8:30 p.m. sharp, right when Jake would step onto the stage. All I had to do was wait. As the speeches began, I stood near the back wall, swirling my drink, calm and detached. The host went on about innovation and entrepreneurship, while my parents beamed, hands clasped proudly. I caught Mom whispering to someone nearby, "That's our youngest. He's always been gifted." I checked my phone. 8:29. I could almost feel my pulse sinking with the ticking clock. At 8:30, Jake walked up to the podium, soaking in the applause. "Wow," he began, grinning. I didn't expect that warm of a welcome. The crowd laughed politely. He launched into his speech, the same smooth, polished lies I'd heard 100 times growing up. When I started Weller Creative Solutions, I had one goal: to help others turn their ideas into reality. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Article published. Danielle's brother texted. "It's live. Front page of the business section." I took a sip of my drink. The taste had never been sweeter. Within 5 minutes, you could feel it, a ripple in the room. The subtle shift of energy as phones started lighting up, screens illuminating faces, whispers spreading like wildfire. Heads turned toward Jake, then toward my parents. I could see the confusion twist across Mom's face first, then Dad's. Someone in the front row held up their phone and whispered something to a colleague. Another person frowned, scrolling rapidly. Jake kept talking, trying to power through, but his voice faltered. Like I said, success is never easy, but with family support." Someone called out from the audience. "Is it true you don't actually have any clients?" The entire room froze. Jake blinked, forcing a chuckle. "Excuse me." Another voice, louder this time. "This article says your LLC hasn't filed taxes in 3 years. You've been claiming fake business expenses." Cameras flashed. People started murmuring, pulling up the article on their phones. My parents looked like statues, pale and motionless. Jake stammered. That's a misunderstanding." But it was too late. The event organizer, clearly panicking, walked up and whispered something to him. Jake's face drained of color. He stepped back from the microphone, muttered something about legal counsel, and hurried off stage, followed closely by my parents. I followed at a distance as they disappeared down a hallway. The moment the doors closed behind them, the sound hit, The muffled shouting, the frantic whispers. My father's voice boomed first. "What did you do, Jake?" Then my mother's trembling. "Oh my God, this can't be happening." And Jake, desperate, angry. "It's not my fault. Someone set me up." That was my cue. I walked forward, quiet and deliberate. When I reached the hallway corner, I leaned against the wall and cleared my throat. Evening. All three of them froze. Mom turned first, eyes wide. "Brian." Jake's face twisted. "You?" "Me," I said simply. Surprise. Dad took a step forward, jaw clenched. "Did you do this?" "Do what?" I asked. "Tell the truth." Jake's fists balled at his sides. "You ruined my life." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the fake one you built on lies and other people's money?" Mom shook her head, voice trembling. "You went too far, Brian. This will destroy us." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You destroyed me years ago. I just returned the favor." She looked like she might cry, but I didn't care. For once, I didn't feel guilt or shame or the desperate need to justify myself. Just relief. "I never wanted your money," I said quietly. "I just wanted respect. But you couldn't even give me that. You turned me into the family ghost, the one who pays the bills while you pretend he doesn't exist." So I stopped pretending too. Dad glared, but he had nothing to say. Jake stepped closer. "You're pathetic. You think this makes you better than us." I met his eyes. "No, it just makes me free." I turned to leave, but then paused and pulled something from my jacket pocket, a small yellow sticky note. The same kind I'd left on his BMW months earlier. I held it out to him. "Figure it out," I said. Then I walked away. By the time I reached the lobby, the story had exploded online. Local entrepreneur's company exposed as fake, family trust under investigation for fraudulent claims. Reporters were already outside, waiting. I slipped out the side door unnoticed, the cold air hitting my face like a baptism. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Over the following weeks, the fallout was brutal. The IRS launched an inquiry into the trust. My parents' accounts were frozen temporarily for review. Jake's business was dissolved within a month. The condo, the crown jewel of his charmed life, was repossessed after investigators traced the down payment to questionable transfers. My parents called me twice. I didn't answer. Emily texted me once. "They're losing everything. Are you happy now?" I stared at her message for a long moment before replying. "No, but I'm finally at peace." And it was true. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just went on with my life. I kept working, kept creating. My art studio grew. My weekends filled with laughter instead of obligations. My apartment, once a lonely space, became a home. I even started seeing someone from pottery class, a quiet woman named Erin who loved my crooked mugs and said my hands looked like they were made for building. She didn't know the full story, not yet, but she knew enough to understand the silence behind my smile. One night, months later, I drove past my parents' old house out of curiosity. The lights were off. The front yard was overgrown. A "for sale" sign leaned crookedly in the dirt. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, before rolling down the window and letting the wind carry away the last of my bitterness. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had built something they could never take, self-respect. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. It was from Marcus. "Congrats, man. The investigation just closed. Looks like your brother's officially banned from holding a business license for 5 years. You're clean." "They're not." I smiled faintly, pulling up to my apartment building. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, quiet and unbothered. I parked, grabbed my keys, and headed upstairs. On my fridge, I'd taped that original sticky note I'd left on Jake's windshield, wrinkled and faded, but still legible. "Figure it out." It reminded me of who I used to be, the quiet brother, the forgotten son, and who I'd become, the man who finally stopped waiting to be seen. As I poured myself a drink, I caught my reflection in the window, calm, certain, unburdened. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a background character in someone else's story. I was the author now, and the chapter on them was finally closed.